I'm going to go very quickly in 20 minutes about what I think the current crisis is about and what it holds for the future. It's going to be quick, so I'll do my best. So I think what this crisis is, and I've been saying this for 2 or 3 years, this is the new era. It is not a short-term problem we're going to buy ourselves out of or borrow so much money or print money that we get out of this. This is, I think, what we have to get used to. And I think this crisis is the onset of what I would call resource depletion and marginal economic growth, and it's hitting the Western countries first for many reasons I won't go into today. And there are no silver bullet solutions. You can print as much money as you want, and the reason is because the situation is extremely complex. There's a lot of factors. We had to talk about population. We can talk about aging of the population and debt levels, and I won't do all that. But since we are mainly young people in the audience today, I think what you have to do is you have to redefine your expectations for what this life will entail for you. Don't set the bar too high, you'll be disappointed. So if I sum this up, I would say whatever I learned in history, it wasn't all that much maybe, but what I've learned is I think the 20th century was a struggle of ideologies, and we went to war many times over it, and the 21st century is a different kind of thing. It's not going to be the end of history like some people think. History doesn't end. I think it's going to be the struggle against the depletion of natural resources on a finite planet while we're still growing in population and while we're all expecting economic growth, and it won't happen. And everything, I think almost everything that you take for granted, or actually more my generation or even the boomers, let's say, not you so much as the young generation, it will change, I think. And we talked a bit about energy supply. We can talk about energy prices. We can talk about what economics or economies will look like in the years to come. We can talk about a debt-based economy, and well, this will still work in 30 or 40 years from now. We're going to have bartering coming back, which you might laugh at me for now, but I wouldn't do that if I were you. We can talk about revolution in transportation, housing, wealth creation, exponential growth, and so on and so forth. The point is that the current crisis is not a temporary phenomenon. It's just a transition to something new. And I don't know what it will be. I don't know if it will be capitalism or socialism or both at different levels. I don't know. Anyway, here is my non-PC slide I couldn't give in the United States, right? So this has been broadcast around the world, so apologies to those people who might feel offended by this. And this is the key slide. If you take the total energy consumption in Canada and divide it by amount of people, 33 million or so, you get about 150,000 kilocalories a day, and that corresponds to about 53 energy slaves if every slave were to use 3,000 kilocalories a day. Meaning, if we didn't have fossil fuels, nuclear power, and hydropower, 53 people would have to work for you instead. If you take Canada as a population, it's all of China would have to work for you with labor to make your lifestyle possible. If I move to an electric car, I probably fire 3 slaves. That's my point. The scale is so vast that I appreciate all the solar power and all the electric cars, and I'm working on it myself, but the scale is so huge that something will have to give, while the rest of the population in so-called emerging countries is looking at the same lifestyle. By the way, Dr. Rosling's talk, very interesting. If we move all these people into the wealthier bracket, thereby bringing down world population, except I don't know how to find all these resources to do it. But that's another story. So technology alone can't do all this. And I think the first response to this crisis now is we say, well, we have to do green, we have to print money, we have to save the planet, we have to invent electric cars and fuel cell cars and hydrogen technology. And we need to do that to still have an advanced society. I do believe that. But we can't expect to run this world on the same scale that we're doing now for all of 9 billion people in 30 years from now. So the green living that you find everywhere in the media is our first response to a true crisis, and we will have to move on from there. So the first challenge is oil. So oil peak, I'm going to talk about this a little bit. We had this already today, so fossil fuel supplies about 80% or so of the world's energy. And that took about 200 years to build. That took about 120 years to build this infrastructure. Gas is about 60 or 70, coal is about 200. If you expect that you can reduce these bars in 20 years and ramp this up, which has not been around very long, well, you have to think again. Fossil fuels will be around for a long time. It's a reality, whether you like it or not. This is an interesting thought experiment. We're burning through 1,000 barrels a second as a world society, 1,000 barrels of oil. Okay, every barrel is 159 liters. Now, this is what I do in my class typically. In the first class of my energy science course, I tell them, guess if we had the following. We had a machine that could burn the oil of a barrel of oil, burn it all, turn this heat into potential energy. And then the question is, how many people could you lift to the top of Mount Everest, and at what cost? Let's say it was $80 a barrel, and the person is 75 kilograms. Because you always hear that gasoline is expensive, oil is expensive. Well, here's the answer. You could lift all of you and more to the top of Mount Everest for 9 cents a person. That's how cheap oil is at $80 a barrel. Okay? The world financial system and the world economy nearly collapsed at $147 a barrel. I could have still lifted probably 500 people to the top of Mount Everest at 18 cents. Oil was still cheap, relatively speaking, for what it can do. All right? It's a very powerful fuel, except we're very wasteful. So I would always say, energy makes the world go round, not money. Money is just faith. Right? You have to have faith in money. There's no gold standard. Energy makes the world go round. And when there's an energy supply problem, you have an economic problem. You can't print yourself out of this misery. So the first thing is, well, here's a quick graph. I'm going to quickly talk about the global oil peak and what the issue is all about in three slides, very quickly. This is US oil production. This the pink curve. There's a data of the US oil production. In 1956, when it was a pretty steep slope, there was a US geologist called M. King Hubbard. He said, in 1970, we're going to peak. The US oil production is going to peak in 1970. That was at a time when they produced the most ever. It was the largest oil producer in the world, and the rate of increase was the largest ever. And no one took him seriously, for obvious reasons. But he was right. And so they peaked in 1970. And then OPEC oil crisis followed 3 years later because OPEC realized, I can't believe the United States is peaking oil production. My goodness, we're getting really powerful here. Anyways, and then there's, like, as they're going down on this depletion curve, there's two little sort of upswings there. The first one is Alaska. I don't know if that's, this laser pointer works here, but anyways, around 1980 or so, there's a little upswing is Alaska, and then there's another upswing there around 2000, that's the Gulf of Mexico. But they continue to decline. Now you can do the same thought experiment for the world oil production. And this is what you see here very quickly. The bars is what we found in history. It's so many barrels of oil we found in history. Every year so many, right? So actually after the oil crisis, 1973, you see there's a sort of upswing again in the mid-70s. That's the North Sea in Alaska. We found a lot of oil as a Western society. We're done with that. And since 1983, this thick curve, which is the actual oil consumption, is exceeding what we find. So that red area there tells you that we're consuming more than we find since 1983. So if you look at it like a bank account, since 1983, you're taking more money out than you put in, and what you put in 100 years or so. So clearly there's an oil supply problem if we continue to do that. Right? And that's my last slide on it. Okay, you might say, well, first of all, I should say, when we're expecting to peak, well, very soon. So if we haven't peaked already, who knows, but we might be peaking oil production probably between 2012 and 2015. And these are not left-wing tree huggers saying this. We're talking about the US military, the German military, and the UK industry task force with Richard Branson on board, who has an interest in this because he runs a big airline, for instance, right? So this is getting serious. Now, in Canada, you might say, I couldn't care less. We have the tar sands, except not really, because whoever signed onto this NAFTA proportional sharing clause, I don't know, obviously the Canadian government. The problem is that the US has a right to the exports of the Canadian oil to the US for the years to come. You can look this up on the internet, by the way. Just punch it in. You can pull this up. Mexico was smart enough not to sign on, right? They have a national oil, their Pemex is nationalized. They didn't sign this. They thought, there's no way we're not going to have control over oil. Canada signed on. Who knows why? So anyways, when we peak in oil production, the point is oil price is going through the roof. Right now, it's $95 a barrel in a recession. So it should tell you something. And a Canadian consumer has to live with that because we're tied to the world oil markets. Last but not least, because of the NAFTA proportional sharing clause. Now you might say, okay, we heard a lot about alternatives. Okay, solar power, wind power, hydrogen, fuel cell cars, battery cars. Here's something I want you to take home with tonight. And it's not all pessimism, so just bear with me, okay? There's an interesting one, though. This is called energy return on investment. If you have an energy supply system like, say, Saudi Arabian oil fields, it took, in the early days of Saudi Arabia oil, about 1 unit of energy you invested into that infrastructure to get 100 units of energy out. Extremely good return. So that's sort of this thing on the left. Now we're getting desperate. We're looking at the tar sands. The ratio is about 4 to 1. So we dropped from 100 to 1 to 4 to 1, right? The Germans, they could only go to war because they figured out how to turn coal into oil. Not oil really, but it still powers your engine. It's sort of synthetic oil. That ratio drops to probably 3 to 1. Shale oil, biodiesel, ethanol, it's somewhere around 1 to 1. There's an endless debate whether biofuels make sense or not. And other than the Brazilian way of doing things with sugarcane, corn-based ethanol is either something like 1.2 to 1 or 0.8 to 1. It doesn't really matter. You couldn't run the world on that kind of scenario. And actually, when you look at the Roman Empire and how it collapsed, there's increasing evidence that it began to collapse when their energy return on investment fell below a critical threshold. But in their case, there was only agriculture. They had no fossil fuels, no nuclear power, no hydropower, nothing. For them, it was the energy supply was agriculture. And that's an ongoing debate anyways. The point is right now the world is running on roughly 15 to 1. There's strong belief that if you begin to drop below 10 to 1, which any one of these would do in the long run, right? Tar sand, coal liquefaction, shale oil, biodiesel, you name it. If we run on that, we fall too low, and I don't think we would have a civilized society anymore, or advanced society for that matter. Here's another problem we have. While this energy transition will take time for many reasons, unfortunately. Call me a pessimist, I think I'm a realist. Some of them are, well, we need these alternative technologies. I like to live in an advanced society. I'm a physics prof. I mean, I like to go to university and work there, and, you know, if we don't have advanced technologies in the future to supply energy, I don't think it will be a university to speak of anymore. Some of the problems are energy prices. When they're too low, we have no incentive to go to alternative technologies. Then they can spike extremely fast and cause a recession, like now, where there's a lack of money to invest in them in the first place. So we need capital. During marginal growth like now, very difficult unless you print it or borrow it. We need precious metals like platinum or rare earth metals, and China is producing 98% of them and withholding them now from the rest of the world. These are needed to have things like electric motors, hydrogen fuel cells, etc. Okay? And having access to those precious metals and rare earth metals is an issue, and their price is going through the roof for many reasons. And that's another paradox you never think about. When you go into a recession, you park your money in commodities, which you then need to transition, but now it's too expensive. You see what I mean? So for all these reasons, I think it will take a long time to transition. One thing we have to keep in mind, don't even bother with energy systems where this energy return on investment is less than, say, 10. Solar power is, as far as I can tell, above 10, so that's a good news. Biofuels, forget about it. Don't even try. Maybe the sugar canes. I like the first few minutes of that battery talk here we just saw. Yes, actually, here's an interesting figure. This is from David Pimentel at Cornell University. If you took all the biomass of the United States of America growing in 1 year, all of it, trees, shrubs, you name it, and you could turn it into liquid fuel, that would correspond to about 60% of US oil consumption. That's it. So we haven't figured out the other 40%, not the coal yet, not the natural gas yet, not the uranium yet, not the hydropower yet, none of it. Just 60%. 60% of their oil is about 40% of their supply, so that's about 24%. A quarter. So that would be your biofuel economy in the United States. Obviously, there would be nothing left, right? You harvest everything. I mean, there's nothing to look at anymore at that point. Right, okay, very quickly, limits of technology. I love this slide, I love it. So There's certain things you can do. I always tell people, you drive a battery car, good for you, pal. You'll still find me on my bicycle. Why is that? Well, we can do certain things. We can reduce smog emissions. We've done it. We can reduce oil dependence. I wouldn't say eliminate it. We can provide lots of useful travel information to get around with technology, and so on and so forth. Certain things we can't do. If you sit in your traffic jam on the 401 in a battery car, you might just about lose your nerves as much as if it was a pickup truck running on gasoline. I think we will. You will be as stressed, as obese, you will feel as miserable when you come home as in any other car. I guarantee you that too. And if you work for City of Oshawa or any other city in the world out there, ask your traffic engineers, it will cost as much to maintain the roads and bridges and highways whether you drive a battery car, fuel cell car, or any other car. It doesn't matter. So, okay, what's the response? Here it is for the young audience. What you will have to do in your lifetime, here's my guess. And there's great ideas tonight, for instance, and there's hope. Therefore, I'm very hopeful, I think. You have to build a society, and I don't know how to do it, to make it as resilient as possible towards energy supply shocks or natural resource supply shocks. And if it's not shocks, it's the slowly diminishing returns of any technology there is. And you'll have to figure this out. And I think you can. Here's the good news slide, and that's the last slide, I promise. So actually, there's the good news. I think we're going to see a shift, inevitably, from standard of living as being the ultimate means of assessing how well we're doing, in North America, I should say. There's other countries that don't do that, by the way. To quality of life, okay? And basically that is GDP per capita on the right side, and on the left side, all the things that actually matter. Life expectancy, education, free Medicare, you name it. And I'm wondering sometimes whether resource depletion, and it sounds a bit negative, right, to say the least, but it might force us into sustainability. And by that I mean these good news here. I think they're all good. Number one, I'm not one of the climate change doubters by any means, but what I'm saying is, the good news is, the International Panel on Climate Change has not taken into account fossil fuel peaks in their last scenario in their predictions of climate change related to CO2 emissions. What I'm saying, in other words, and by the way, they're going to do this in the next scenario, they say, if I had an oil peak in 2012, climate change-wise, great news. If I had a coal peak, by the way, you might have 150 years of coal left, those figures mean nothing. The point is, when does the coal production peak? And it might peak, the German government thinks 2015, some say 2035, but rather soon. That would be great. Bad news for China, by the way, because they run everything on coal. Natural gas, now they think we have twice as much as we thought we had. That would be bad news for climate change. Pay as you go. If you think about the car, it's the only thing into which you invest tremendous amounts of capital to get from A to B. Everything else, a bicycle is relatively cheap, and pretty much everything else you don't even own. You don't own a bus, you don't own a train, you don't own an airplane, you don't own a ship, nothing, and you don't even want to. You just want to pay to go from A to B, and this is it. Insurance, maintenance, reliability, you name it, I want nothing to do with that. I think we're going to see the days that more of us, and this is happening now in Houston, Texas, and Hamburg, Germany, for instance, where they're launching initiatives where people don't own a car anymore, and what it is, in this case it's Daimler-Benz, no advertisement here, right, but this is what it is. They park smart cars across the city, GPS-based, and you can book them with your GPS handheld device right now. Okay, it would tell you like, okay, right outside there's a smart car. I booked this right now. You walk up to it, use your smart card and drive off, park it anywhere else in the city you want, and walk away. And you're only being charged for time of use and how far you traveled. That's it. Now they've done this in one city in Germany, and it's a city the size of Oshawa, 150,000 people, and they signed up 1 in 3 people with a driver's license between 18 and 35 years of age in 3 months. And more than 50% of the young people said, oh, please make that permanent because I'm going to sell my car. So there's hope. So resource constraints will force us to be, at least sometimes, more sustainable. There will be localization of economy. I hope Jeff Rubin from former CIBC Bank is talking a lot about it. The hope is basically that lots of offshore jobs might come back as transportation costs go through the roof. I don't know if it's true, but there's a thought that that might happen. With that would come revitalization of domestic manufacturing. I also think if you go to college now or have been in the past or will go soon, I think in 20 years you don't have to feel so bad anymore, meaning, oh God, I wish I had gone to university. Because I think practical skills will be very much needed in the years to come, right? I always say, I love those solar panels, but none of my students in physics will install them. I know that. It's going to be a college student or maybe mechanical engineering student. We had a presentation, which is great, but it will very unlikely be a physics student, okay? I think we're going to have resurgence of music, arts, and culture, because that's what's left, right? Okay? Basically. Well, I mean, you know, to drive my point home, I guess. If we have to get along with less, you really want to know your neighbor. Trust me. As he is my own neighborhood already, actually. We begin to share all kinds of stuff. I don't know why it's taking place. I don't even know why. I just have a sense it's an economic incentive somehow in a depressed climate. But I can't really point a finger to it, but it's happening. And the last slide, being German. So you can always brew beer. And this is not a joke. In recessions in vast parts of Europe, alcohol consumption often goes up. Not always, depending on the price. But anyway, thank you for your attention. There you go.
Incredible.